ladies and gentlemen. I'm Daniel from Let'sBeNerds.com. I want to thank you for joining me today as we begin a new series on the website where we create these short videos discussing some of the recent topics that we've been covering on the website. I'm really excited to talk about DC Rebirth, as the title intro card said. I'm particularly excited to talk about DC Rebirth because I've been a fan of DC Comics since I was a little kid. The first introduction I had to the series was in the Batman the Animated Series that came out in 1992. So I've been reading, and I started reading their comic books probably somewhere in the mid 2000s or so, and I've been reading ever since. And I actually was a fan of the New 52. So when they started canceling that and started making the switch more towards going back to the roots of the DC characters, I, for one, was a little concerned only because I did enjoy the New 52. I enjoyed the Batman run of comics, not just the title Batman, but Detective Comics, Nightwing, which eventually became Grayson, Batwoman, just things of all those titles like that I've come to enjoy. So from them switching back from that and saying we're going to start this Rebirth, which, as many of you may know by now, as DC, at least the way DC's spinning it, is that it's not really a reboot of any sorts. It's more of DC just trying to go back to the essence and the core of its characters, its stories, which as a comic book fan is very exciting to me. And I've recently got a chance to read not only the title DC Rebirth comic written by Jeff Johns, but I've now had the opportunity to read both Wonder Woman Rebirth issue, The Flash's, Batman and Detective Comics, Action Comics, the Green Lanterns. I've initially read. Obviously I haven't read everything yet because everything's not out yet. So I'm still looking forward to, like, one thing that in the comics I was just reading this weekend was Batgirl. One of my favorite series from the New 52 was Batgirl, and so I'm excited to see where they're taking the character now. I actually just watched a video on YouTube about it where they're talking about Batgirl going on this road trip of enlightenment, trying to find herself, trying to train more, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with that character. Even a matter of fact, one thing I can say that I was pleasantly surprised is that DC has stuck to their word, at least from my perspective, where they want to have a more commitment to fans and drawing these stories back to the reasons why we love DC's character. Because what gets lost in the movie world is that these characters have a base. They're human beings for the most part. Some of them obviously metahumans or Kryptonians, but they're, in a way, they have a humanity to them that should speak to these characters, that should speak to the fans and realize why we love them, why we want to continue reading them. And so for me, one thing that I saw that really made me excited was I was reading Flash's DC Rebirth comic. And one of the biggest reasons I was just amazed by that is that gave me the Flash I've always known. It gave me the Flash that a lot of people really connect to. Because many times throughout the first issue, as I was reading it, you would hear how Flash was saying he was too late. He wasn't fast enough. That all he really wants to do is make up for what he can't do by doing more. And when you see that from the Flash, which is the very basis of his character, is he's a character that realizes he's the fastest man alive, and yet there's times where fate or society, he can't be fast enough. Things are just out of his control, and so he tries to keep as much in control as possible. And so you see that in his first issue where he really does try to bring out this pathos, so to speak, of you see a guy that has all the power in the world, but feels like he can never do enough to correct everything that may happen in the world. And for me, that really goes back to the basis of the character, where you really feel like this is Flash. This is the guy who's selfless. This is the guy who, in Crisis of Infinite Earths, he gave his own life. And we didn't see this particular Flash, which Barry Allen, for 20 years after he gave his life. Then you see the same thing in different iterations of DC media, whether the animated series or I remember Young Justice, where that same ideology of selflessness with the Flashes, which was seen in Barry, but you got to see it in Wally West when he was Kid Flash, and he dies in that series as well. You get Flash, and he dies in that series as well. You get to see the essence of Flash, and from that standpoint, DC, at least on the front of Josh Williamson's Flash series, he has already stuck to that promise. Now we'll see going forward how far he sticks to it, but I can honestly, I love what I've seen so far, because you really do get to see the essence of the character. Same thing with the Batman stuff. So far, I've read Batman's Rebirth issue and Detective Comics, and with those two series, though written differently by two different writers, a bunch of different artists, all that stuff, what you still see is this essence of Batman wanting to be more, wanting to do better, wanting to make sure that he's as improved as possible, that he's still. And one thing I will say that I did love about these particular two comics is that he was a detective, which I think, while a lot of the great stories that Jeff Johns did, sometimes that got lost a little bit, in my opinion. The detective aspect of Batman would sometimes be lost upon all this chaos and all this very deep and emotional storytelling that Jeff Johns would do and Scott Snyder would do, that it got lost in terms of how Batman really processes his work, how he stays committed to his work. And so for me, I was again pleasantly surprised to see that aspect of Batman not only be not really return, but be heavily featured, because it almost, at times, it took a back seat to what DC would do, and that was a very big issue for me. So I'm pleasantly surprised to see that it's not only is it still there, but it's now more of an emphasis on the storytelling. Even more so, what I have loved, or what I've loved that I'm hearing about the other issues of Batman. I already talked about Batgirl really quickly, but with Nightwing, it's something simple as in New 52, he went from his black and blue suit to a black and red suit, which really is not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. It's just a color change. But what it really steps out to is DC saying we're going back to what these characters are. And in essence of going back to those characters, we're going back to what they wore originally, what makes them. And one of the most iconic things about Nightwing is the fact he wears black and blue. His color scheme is not far off from Batman and the other Bat family members, obviously excluding probably Red Hood and Batwoman because they wear red, but though other characters are not too far off from that color scheme of black and blue. And he's, as the first Robin, he should be the main emphasis of that similarity between the Bat family. And another thing for Nightwing that I'm interested to see is that when eventually it does come out, if you remember back at DC's conference on WonderCon, they were talking about the fact that he's going to be getting a new mentor in Raptor, which oddly enough, and the funny thing about it, as I rewatched the video, was he mentioned the fact that his first story is called Better Than Batman, which in essence is still seeing we're still seeing that core of Nightwing where he believes in what Batman taught him, but he feels like there's got to be a different way to do it than the nonstop grind of being in there every single day, every single night, not sleeping, not eating, stressing yourself out beyond belief, like he saw with Batman. That's how he was trained. So that's a lot of ways how he's lived his life. And now he started to expand beyond that and saying there's got to be more to being a better superhero than just slaving away for hours and days on end, not eating, not sleeping, just basically being enthralled or just being placed into that one state of being for long periods of times. And him trying to seek that enlightenment still goes in line with what his character has always done. And that's something I think should always stick to what the core of the crux of a character should be, is he's always been someone that's been striving to be more hopeful than his predecessor, hopeful than his mentor in Batman. So seeing that they're going to try to explore that more makes me ecstatic about it. So really quickly, one thing that they haven't released yet that I actually, when I first heard about it, that I'm really excited still to see is the new Superman, which basically gives us a Chinese Superman who is a bit of a jerk, who comes to realize through his newly found powers what more he can be and what better service he can be to the world. And one of the biggest reasons I appreciate them exploring that avenue of Superman is that in that expansion of the character, they're broadening their borders. And I learned Chinese for 4 years. I've been to Shanghai, which is going to be the main backdrop of the city or of the book. I've seen this and I had so much fun there that it has a special place in my heart. So I can't wait to start reading a Superman comic that takes place in this city, in this country, and seeing how the writers approach not only what we know about China, what their perspective on being Chinese is, how being that same character with newly found Superman powers, how that all devolves into being this newly created functioning character, and it's just in a world of all these superhumans, including the guy he gets his powers from in Superman. So I can't wait to see more of that. I think DC's taking steps forward in terms of their comic books. Not that I think that the New 52 failed in any way. Maybe it did for some people, but for me, it didn't. So what I want to see them do is push forward with more, being more on the edge, being more progressive in terms of their comics and storylines. Now, the one thing I will say that they can't fail to do, and this is something that Marvel has done for years now, that I think DC also needs to make, they may not want to necessarily steal it, but they need to probably focus on it more, is making their stories feel more human. Because a lot of times with DC stories, they become so godlike. I mean, and it's hard not to do that when you have a character like Superman or this billionaire in Batman who's just always expanding his knowledge on what he knows about the universe. When you have characters that protect the entire universe, like the Green Lantern Corps, it's hard to stay grounded into this world of everyday problems. So I think what would greatly help a lot of the Batman stories is staying grounded, keeping it within the confines of not just Gotham with all the crazy rogues gallery of criminals, but keep it within a relationship just between Batman and Alfred. An entire storyline on just that relationship would serve to ground a lot of Batman's character. Same thing with Superman. I know a lot of people didn't like Batman's v Superman, and they didn't appreciate the fact that he spent most of his time saving his mother and Lois. But what I can appreciate about that is that you're humanizing him. He is literally the perfect being. The major flaw with him is kryptonite, magic, and other things like that. But that's not the important part. Is that he's on an everyday basis, he's pretty much the perfect being. And so when you have that, there needs to be something that humanizes a perfect being. So I just read Action Comics number 958, and what I appreciate about that is not only that was it slightly confusing because Lex's Superman is calling himself Superman. Superman's apparently dead, but there's another Superman flying around, and there's a Clark Kent, but there's Lois and his son, and it's a very not convoluted story, but it's a very complex story that is going to be untold throughout the coming months and years. But the way I've really looked at it was, this is something where when you include Doomsday, Lex, and Lois and his son, and then another Clark Kent and another Superman, what you're creating is this environment of, we're not doing this big world bashing event. We're trying to figure out what's going on. Who is Superman? Who is Clark Kent? Why is there two of them? Why is Lex calling himself Superman? All of this stuff is not, while it's sort of being taken on a big scale, it really isn't, because it's really just a character identification issue where we need to find out as readers who is Superman. And I think that's the basis of that comic so far, is just finding out who the hell is Superman again. And that's one thing I can honestly say that I probably will read Action Comics more now, just from reading that one issue, just because I've never really been a big Superman guy, because he's always seemed so perfect. And now reading this, it's made me want to say, okay, I know who Superman typically is, but what is your interpretation of that now? Why are we getting two different people sticking claims to the title of Clark Kent, the title of Superman? How is it different, and how can we evolve into what Superman truly is? And so for me, it's been a joy reading a lot of these books. I've gotten through most of them in one weekend. I think I finished, of the Rebirth titles that are out so far, only one I haven't finished is Aquaman, and that's only because I had to make a choice between getting Silk number 8 and Aquaman. Sorry, even though I love Aquaman, I'm gonna choose Silk sometimes because Silk's awesome. I digress on that front, but from the rest of the characters I've read, like even going to Wonder Woman, I thought it was interesting, not only how it's beautifully drawn, but just how much they focus on her past with Steve, into how she's trying to find her way back to Themyscira. Like, that was one of the more telling aspects of the comic book at the end title, when it looks like, I think Cheetah or something like that, it's just hovering over her, asking for her help. Okay, I'm actually looking at it right now, and actually it's Cheetah. I did remember that. But yeah, so you get Cheetah hovering over her, looking like she's ready to claw her throat out, but she's only asking for Cheetah's help. And seeing this brokenness this broken nature, better way to put it, of Wonder Woman, again, it's really DC going back to the crux of making their characters more human, making them feel less like the gods of the comic book world, and making them feel like, yeah, they're gods. Yeah, they have godlike powers, but they're still, in a certain sense, human beings. They're still, in a way, they're characters that drop back and need to be told as if through the perspective of being human, not being these overarching powerful beings, but someone almost like you and me. And that's one thing I think DC, as it moves forward with the rest of books that are coming out later this year. I know one that I'm really excited to continue to read, or start to not continue, but start to read, is their Teen Titans issue with Damian Wayne leading the Teen Titans. Because there's something about Damian that's so compelling, because you see this confident, might as well say arrogant little boy, basically, in Damian, or he's 13 now, actually. But seeing this arrogance to him, and you see that he knows he's Batman's son. He knows that he's a born leader. He understands where he comes from and with the League of Shadows. He gets all that. And so that gives him all this confidence in the world. And he's willing to admit at times what he doesn't know, but he never can acknowledge it almost. And it's going to be interesting to see him as he's leading the Teen Titans. How does he go from being Batman's second for many years to now being a leader of his own group and having to take on the responsibility of making sure Beast Boy, Starfire, amongst another Raven and other Calcutta characters, that he's not putting them in danger, which you know is probably going to happen just because that's his character. His character has that ability to be a little insane sometimes and doesn't always think things through. So it'll be interesting to see how his character in conjunction work in a team environment progresses, because you're going to really get to see a humanized Damian Wayne, only because typically when you see him, he's confident, arrogant, and he can pretty much kick anyone's butt in anything. So it'll be interesting to see him take on a leadership role where it's not always in his hands. That's the one thing about him. He always wants control. He always wants something to be where he can take control of that situation and he can prove himself. So it'll be interesting to see him not being in a situation where he can't prove himself, where he can't take control, and he has to delegate. He has to say, here, you need to go do this. I can't do it, or I'm trusting you to do it. So trust is probably going to be the biggest storyline in that book. At least I'm speculating here, is that he's going to have to trust people and they're going to have to trust him, which is something that's always been hard. From his mother to his dad to his grandfather, trust is not something they all do really well. So it's going to be interesting to see how that lack of trust parlays itself into leading a team. And I think the last thing I actually quickly want to touch on, since I've gone for almost 21 minutes now, is Harley Quinn. And again, in preparation for this video, I wanted to read more about Harley Quinn and just speaking on top of that character as a whole. And it was interesting to hear them talk during that conference I was watching, hear them talk about how Harley Quinn is pretty much become a fourth standard bearer for their comic books, because Harley Quinn's comic books, which I've read all 28 of them so up to this point, I haven't gotten to 29 yet, but all 28 of them have been different. They have spoken differently about that character. And what I love about that is Harley Quinn's books don't relate to the other books that DC properties that they have. A lot of their books are very serious. And Harley at times can have her serious moments, but it's about being fun, enjoying herself, really trying to find herself. And I'm really excited to know that she's not really getting a rebirth. They're just continuing what she's doing. If anything, they're going to be crazier with it. And I can't wait to see how crazy they can get. Because some of the books that in her series so far, there have been things she's done, whether it be getting a Green Lantern ring, or that date she went on with Batman, or just her continuous run-ins with Poison Ivy. I can't, and especially now that I just quickly thought about it after I said Poison Ivy, I started reading her team-ups with Harley Quinn and Power Girl. Seeing that progress further, I'm glad DC understands that whole if it's not broke, don't fix it mentality. Harley Quinn's books aren't broken. They're successful because they're different, because people love the character of Harley Quinn. So I can't wait to see them continue that same narrative of having fun as they write the Harley Quinn books, Amanda Conner to be exact. And I can't wait to see them push it further, be crazier, and really also bring in more cameos. So we get to see different sides of other characters, not just Poison Ivy and Power Girl, but maybe a different side of Batgirl. And she comes not bringing Harley Quinn into Batgirl's comics, but going the other way, where there's a little more fun, and vibrance to Batgirl. Or one character I would love to see to get a cameo into her book is Red Hood. Because Red Hood's always serious, but he's such an asshole half the time that you really can't take him serious, that you really can't see him having that much fun, even though his brand of fun is more violent, more bloody. So it'll be nice to see it dial back where he has to realize, this is complete nonsense. Why am I here with Harley Quinn right now. There's no reason for me to be here. So I want to see him having to go through that same nature and perspective of I'm in this weird space right now and I don't want to be here. And that's how I want every character that shows up in that book to almost feel, where they realize, why are we even here right now? There's absolutely no reason for us to be in this book right now or in this world with Harley. She's insane. And so DC moving forward with the Harley Quinn series, the way it's been going strong, I'm ecstatic about that. And so lastly, I want to touch on Jeff Johns' creation, which was the DC Rebirth story. DC Rebirth #1, as people know, it's the one with the big cover of all the characters reaching for this mysterious hand that Jeff Johns said we'll eventually learn about who that is. So what I can't wait to see is, as I read the book itself, all 80 pages of it, it will be interesting to see how each character, as they peel back and try to find that missing time where Wally was the Flash, and people can't understand or connect the pieces between what was pre-New 52 and what was the New 52. So I want to see that piecing together in that big epic event that's most definitely going to happen. For one of my biggest curiosities with that is the progression of Kid Flash in that, only because a lot of DC's major storylines have centered around the Flash. As much as we love Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and all these different characters, whenever DC needs to make a big shakeup, it's typically with someone with a Flash title, whether that's the Golden Age Flash, Barry Allen, Wally West, or even Wally West, except the younger version of Wally West, as Wally West's cousin. I want to see how DC takes this new version of Wally West and makes him a pivot point, because each Flash, as they progress throughout the years in the comics, eventually becomes a pivot point for a storyline, whether that's Barry in Flashpoint, Wally West now, or the younger Wally West. At some point, I want to see those characters, see how he progresses and become the pivot point for the next big story. And so, in short, I can honestly say I'm loving what DC Rebirth is doing right now. And I can't wait to see the rest of the books come out, because I think that it's always been fun for me, especially in the past year, with all new, all different Marvel. I've loved what they've been doing. One of my favorite books to read with that series is All New Wolverine. One, I'm a big Wolverine fan, and two, I love X-23. So in that same vein, it was something different, but there's actual substance to these characters. And if DC can go back and find the core and the substance of each of their characters, that's going to make this entire DC Rebirth worth it. This entire change, or this entire reimagining of what they've been doing for the past decade or so. Actually, not really a decade, past 5 years, actually. For the past 5 years, it's gonna make that worth it for the reader. For all of us who love DC or love Marvel, this is a good time, because we're seeing how not only has society started changing the storylines, but it started changing how the writers and the artists treat the perspective of society, how they're trying to interweave what's going on today with what happens with their superpowered characters. So I really want to see Rebirth really be that and really provide a spark to the comic book world that I think it can. Because all I've heard so far is nothing but positives about it. And if that continues, hopefully that weaves itself into the TV series, into the movies department. Because one thing with DC movies, they've lacked fun. And one of the biggest things they've missed, even though there's some DC movies I like the Nolan trilogy of the Batman movies, those I like, but those weren't based on actual Batman storyline, or they weren't centered on Batman storylines. Those are things that Nolan and his brother created. So I want to see these stories that I hold near and dear to my heart. I want to see them brought on screen and brought on screen with a life that a lot of DC's comic books have had, that have been lost in that transition between being so realistic that we can't have fun. So with that being said, I want to thank you all for joining me today on Let's Be Nerds podcast. If you like what you heard, there will be, let me know in the comments below what more videos you want me to talk about. Just always a reminder, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Let's Be Nerds. And also visit letsbenerds.com, where we cover the latest and greatest in comics, movies, music, and anime. And I appreciate you for listening, and hopefully you'll join us again.